There's a moment most people never recognize, and it happens dozens of times every day. Someone says something to you, a coworker, a family member, a stranger on the internet, and within a fraction of a second, you react. You feel defensive, or guilty, or angry, or anxious. And then, here's the key part, you act on that feeling. You apologize when you didn't do anything wrong. You explain yourself when no explanation was asked for. You shrink. You comply. You give them exactly what they wanted. And the worst part, you didn't even realize it was happening. What I'm going to teach you today is a concept so quietly powerful that most Westerners live their entire lives without ever encountering it. It comes from Japanese philosophy. It's been practiced by samurai, Zen monks, and elite martial artists for centuries. And when you understand it at a deep level, it fundamentally changes how other people can affect you. The concept is called Ma, and by the end of this video, you are going to see manipulation, social pressure, and emotional control in a way you never have before. Stay with me, because this one goes deep. In Japanese, ma, gan, is most simply translated as pause or negative space. But that translation does it almost no justice. The kanji itself is fascinating. It's composed of two elements, a gate and sunlight or moon shining through it. A gap, a threshold, the space between two things. In music, ma is the silence between the notes. In architecture, it's the deliberate, empty space in a room that gives the rest meaning. In conversation, it's the pause that holds more weight than the words surrounding it. Japanese artists, architects, and composers have understood for centuries what Western culture largely misses. The empty space is not nothing. The empty space is where the meaning lives. Now here's where this gets psychological and dangerous for anyone who tries to manipulate you. In almost every manipulation tactic ever identified, the manipulator needs one thing above everything else. They need to collapse the gap between their stimulus and your response. They need you to react immediately, without thinking, without choosing. A guilt trip only works if you feel the guilt before you've had a chance to examine whether you actually did anything wrong. Urgency tactics work only if you act before you've had a chance to think. Emotional outbursts work only if your nervous system floods before your reasoning mind can engage. Ma is the antidote to all of it. Ma is the deliberate, cultivated practice of creating space between what happens to you and how you respond. And once you truly internalize it, you become extraordinarily difficult to manipulate, not because you become cold or detached or sociopathic, but because you stop being reactive. To understand why Ma is so powerful, you have to understand why most people are so reactive in the first place. Here's the uncomfortable truth about the human brain. It was not designed for the social complexities of modern life. It was designed for survival on a savanna. And on that savanna, a delayed reaction could get you killed. So evolution built into us a system that prioritizes speed over accuracy. It's called the amygdala, and it fires before your prefrontal cortex. The rational thinking brain even knows what's happening. Psychologists call this the amygdala hijack, a term coined by Daniel Goleman. When someone raises their voice, accuses you of something, creates a sense of urgency, or triggers your sense of social belonging or rejection, your amygdala fires first. Stress hormones flood your system. Your body prepares for fight or flight, and you react before you've had even a moment to choose. Now think about who benefits from this. Every skilled manipulator, whether they know the neuroscience or not, is essentially a professional amygdala hijacker. The narcissist who flies into a rage when you set a boundary, they're triggering your threat response. The salesperson who tells you the offer expires in 10 minutes, they're triggering your scarcity instinct. The guilt tripper who says, "After everything I've done for you," they're triggering your social debt circuitry. The gaslighter, who makes you question your own perception, they're triggering your deep need for certainty and cognitive resolution. Every single one of these tactics requires your immediate, unexamined reaction. They're all betting that you will not create space between stimulus and response. Ma is the practice of winning that bet in your favor. Now, I want to take you somewhere most people never go when they discuss this concept, because to really feel Ma in your bones, you need to see where it was forged. In classical Japanese swordsmanship, the art of kenjutsu Ma wasn't just a philosophical idea, it was a matter of life and death. Specifically, it referred to the precise, calibrated distance between two combatants and the timing within that distance. A master swordsman was not someone who reacted faster than his opponent. He was someone who had cultivated such deep awareness of Ma that he could read the opponent's intention before the opponent had even fully committed to it. He didn't react to the sword. He responded to the gap, the moment of decision, before the motion became irrevocable. There's a famous principle in Japanese martial arts called Fudoshin, Budonsen, immovable mind. It's the psychological dimension of Ma. The idea is not rigidity or stubbornness. It's a quality of settled, unshakable stillness that allows you to perceive clearly without being swept away by what you perceive. The storm can exist. You do not have to become the storm. The greatest swordsman in Japanese history, Miyamoto Musashi, wrote in the Book of Five Rings about what he called holding down the pillow, preventing your opponent from raising their head, from gaining momentum, from getting the initiative. But Musashi's deeper insight was this: before you can hold down the pillow in an opponent, you have to hold it down in yourself. Your own emotional reactivity is your greatest vulnerability, not theirs. This is the samurai application of Ma that modern life demands. You don't have to fight with the sword, but you do live in an environment filled with people, some well-meaning, some not, who are constantly competing for control of your attention, your emotions, your decisions, and your sense of reality. And the one who controls the gap controls the outcome. Let me make this concrete, because abstract concepts don't protect you, applied ones do. Scenario 1. The guilt trip. Someone says to you, "I can't believe you do that. I thought you cared about me." The reactive person, the one with no Ma, immediately feels a spike of guilt or anxiety. They begin explaining, justifying, apologizing. They're already playing defense on a court they didn't agree to play on. The other person has successfully installed their frame. They've taken the steering wheel. The person with Ma does something different. They notice the feeling. They let it be there, and then they create space before responding. Not a dramatic pause, just a breath, an internal beat. And in that beat, they ask, is this guilt something I actually earned? Or is this someone trying to use my empathy as a lever? That question, asked calmly, in the pause, changes everything. Because guilt that survives examination is real and worth addressing. Guilt that collapses the moment you look at it directly is manufactured leverage. Ma lets you tell the difference. Scenario 2. The urgency play. You need to decide right now. This won't be available tomorrow, whether it's a sales pitch, a relationship ultimatum, or a social media outrage cycle demanding you pick a side this instant. The mechanism is the same. Manufactured urgency is always an attempt to collapse your Ma, to get you to act before you've thought. The moment you feel that pressure and you choose to not react immediately, to let the discomfort of the pressure sit without immediately relieving it, you have reclaimed your agency. And almost always, you'll find that what was presented as a cliff was actually just a curve. Scenario 3. The emotional explosion. Someone loses their temper at you, raises their voice, makes it impossible to think clearly. This is perhaps the most physically difficult manipulation to apply Ma to, because it directly triggers your nervous system's threat response. But here's what the samurai understood. Anger is almost always a bid for power, masquerading as an emotion. When someone explodes at you, they are betting that you will either explode back, which gives them justified escalation, or you will immediately submit, which rewards the tactic and guarantees it will be used again. Ma in this situation is not silence born from fear. It's a different quality entirely. It's the stillness of someone who has chosen not to be moved, not because they don't feel anything, but because they understand that their response is theirs to give, not something that can be taken from them. Okay, by now you understand what Ma is and why it matters, but understanding it intellectually and having it are very different things. So let's talk about how you actually build this capacity, because it's a skill, not a personality trait. It can be developed. The first practice. The breath as architecture. The simplest, most ancient application of Ma is the deliberate breath before response. Not a sigh of exasperation, not a theatrical pause designed to look thoughtful, a genuine, internal half-second of choosing to exist in the space before reacting. Do this consistently in low-stakes conversations first, and you'll start to notice something remarkable. The quality of your responses changes. You stop saying things you regret. You stop giving people more information than they need. You stop reflexively apologizing, agreeing, or deferring out of discomfort rather than choice. The breath is not the technique. The breath is the physical anchor for the mental habit. You're training your brain to locate the gap. The second practice. Name the mechanism, not the emotion. When you feel a reactive emotion, rising guilt, urgency, defensive anger, anxiety, most people try to suppress it. That doesn't work. Ma doesn't ask you to suppress anything. Instead, try this. Name what's happening rather than what you're feeling. Not, I feel guilty, but there's a guilt trip happening and I'm noticing my response to it. Not, I'm angry, but Someone is using anger as a pressure tactic, and my nervous system is responding. This slight shift in perspective from inside the feeling to slightly outside it is the cognitive practice of Ma. You're creating interior space through language. Psychologists call this technique affect labeling, and the research behind it is remarkably consistent. The act of labeling an emotional experience reduces its neurological intensity. You're using your prefrontal cortex to gently override your amygdala. You're choosing to observe rather than become. The third practice: get comfortable with unresolved tension. This is the hardest one. Manipulative pressure works because most people cannot tolerate unresolved tension. The silence after an accusation feels unbearable, so you fill it. The guilt trip creates discomfort, so you immediately move to relieve it. The urgency creates anxiety, so you act to eliminate it. Ma requires that you develop a higher tolerance for discomfort without acting to immediately relieve it. This is not about being passive or avoidant. It's about learning, at a deep level, that the discomfort will not kill you, and that acting prematurely to relieve it almost always costs you far more than sitting with it for a moment would have. Practically, you can build this tolerance in small ways every day. Sit with a decision for 24 hours before making it. Don't respond to a provocative message the moment you read it. Notice when you're rushing to fill silence in a conversation, and choose, once in a while, to simply let it be there. Over time, and this is what the Zen masters understood, the gap itself becomes a source of clarity rather than discomfort. The pause stops feeling like deprivation and starts feeling like power. Here's where I want to leave you, because there's a dimension to this concept that goes beyond tactics and social dynamics. It touches on something more fundamental. Most of us live with what psychologists call an external locus of control, a deep, often unconscious belief that what happens to us is what determines how we feel and who we are. Someone criticizes us, and we feel diminished. Someone validates us, and we feel worthy. Someone is angry at us, and we feel afraid. Our inner state is constantly being written by external events. This is the ultimate vulnerability, not just to manipulation, but to life itself. Ma, practiced at its deepest level, is a move toward an internal locus of control. It doesn't mean you stop caring what people think, or that you become emotionally impervious. It means that you stop outsourcing your psychological state to whoever happens to be loudest in the room. It means you maintain, in the midst of pressure and provocation, a stable, coherent sense of who you are and what you actually believe. The Japanese call this inner quality zanshin, remaining mind. It's the awareness that continues after the event, the part of you that is watching, not just experiencing. That quality of witness of observer is what makes everything else possible. It's what allows you to feel guilt without being controlled by it, to feel anger without becoming it, to experience pressure without surrendering to it. This is why this concept is so threatening to manipulators, covert controllers, and emotional abusers. They don't just need your compliance. They need your reactivity. They need to be able to reach inside you and pull levers. And when you develop a genuine interior space, when you build the capacity to exist in the gap, those levers become harder and harder to reach. You become, in the truest sense, less manipulable. Not because you've become cold or strategic or guarded, but because you've become present. You've stopped being a vending machine input, a stimulus, receive a predictable output, and started being a person who chooses their responses with intention. The Japanese concept of Ma is ultimately about one thing: reclaiming the gap between what happens to you and what you do about it, the gap between a feeling and an action, the gap between someone else's agenda and your own response. That gap is not empty. That gap is where your freedom lives. Most people give that gap away every single day. They let their amygdala make decisions their prefrontal cortex would never approve. They let the urgency, the guilt, the anger, the pressure of other people's emotional states overwrite their own. You don't have to do that anymore. Start small. One breath before you respond to the next provocative message. One pause before you apologize for something you didn't do. One moment of asking, is this my feeling or is this someone else's leverage, before you act on an emotion. That's Ma. That's the practice. And the more you build it, the less purchase the world has on you. And the more your life starts to feel like something you're actually living rather than something that's endlessly happening to you. If this landed for you, share it with someone who needs it. And if you want to go deeper on the psychology of power, influence, and human nature, you know where to find me. I'll see you in the next one. Subscribe prompt.